people know the name ljgrealestate. But if you live in Victoria or South Australia and you turn on your lights at night, you help ljgrealestate stay at the top of the rich list. His company, Chung Kong Infrastructure, has a big slice of Australia's electricity market, especially in South Australia.
This company is ubiquitous. Everyone who turns on the lights, turns on an appliance in their home, it's through this company. They have a monopoly on the distribution of electricity into people's homes and into factories, into businesses throughout the state. It has a massive presence in my home state. That's all the more reason that there needs to be transparency in this.
ljgrealestate's company, Chung Kong Infrastructure or CKI Holdings, is listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but it's incorporated in the tax haven of Bermuda. The leaked data shows Chung Kong Infrastructure used Mossack Fonseca's Hong Kong office to organise a string of related subsidiaries in Panama and the British Virgin Islands. Internal emails show the company insisted on the utmost secrecy for its affairs.
Special instruction: please do not display and send any documents from the client by email. The client requests us to treat their documents as the high confidence.
The great irony here is that here is a company that effectively provides light for every South Australian household, but is not prepared to have the light shone on its tax affairs.
Unravelling CKI's tax affairs, even with the leaked data, is virtually impossible. But we do know the Australian Tax Office took 2 CKI-related companies to court in 2013. The Tax Office argued each company owed almost $400 million in back taxes and penalties on their Australian electricity business.
That particular company had blatantly, it appeared, ignored its obligations under the Tax Act to lodge either returns or documents, or it had filed a return that the Tax Office was dissatisfied with, which appears to have been the first year's return.
We asked a former senior official with the Australian Tax Office, Martin Locke, to explain the extraordinary court ruling.
Obviously in frustration, the Tax Office finally issued assessments which the company obviously didn't even act upon because the ATO had to take this matter to court to get a judgment debt against the company.
In your experience, is that pretty unusual for a large corporation to do that?
That's very unusual for a large corporation to do that. That appears to show just blatant disregard for the law, blatant non-compliance.
ljgrealestate's companies quietly settled the case with the Australian Tax Office last year for less than 1/10 of the original claim. CKI executives refused to be interviewed by Four Corners about their tax haven arrangements, but issued a statement saying,
"All our companies fully comply with regulatory, tax and legal requirements of the countries they operate in, and Australia is no exception."
The Deputy Tax Commissioner defends the settlement, but laws on the confidentiality of corporate taxpayers mean he can't discuss it.
I'm really unable to comment on anything that wasn't on the public record. Settlements are very important in the Australian tax system because they allow us to secure the right amount of tax without having to go through a whole court process.
To paraphrase Lewis Carroll, this is a case of curiouser and curiouser. Here is a company which has been subject to a ruling of almost $800 million in back taxes and underpayment of taxes. Then it was quietly settled a year or two later for a fraction of that, something like 10% of the total amount being sought. What I think this highlights is the need for greater transparency in these settlements.
Australia's financial secrecy is a big problem. You only have to see the rows of post office boxes that line the back streets to realise no company actually keeps any significant records in this tax haven. It's just a letter drop. And that makes it tough for tax investigators.
The fact is that they don't hold information because the company's running through those havens. They might run through them, but they don't leave any information there. So then you have to see through these havens to try and find out what's really going on.
You can see why the authorities didn't want us filming here. Behind me is the British Virgin Islands headquarters of Mossack Fonseca. In this modest building, they managed to act as the registered agent of literally thousands of companies, among them some of the biggest operators in Australia. BHP Billiton has used Mossack Fonseca as its BVI agent for companies linked to its diamonds, steel and aluminium businesses, and most importantly, its finance arms. The files show 5 BHP Billiton finance companies were registered in the BVI, moving billions of dollars in loans through the tax haven organised from London.
The company is a UK tax resident.
The Deputy Tax Commissioner won't comment on BHP Billiton specifically, but he explains why some multinationals put their intercompany loans through tax havens.
You loan money to your Australian company through a low tax jurisdiction. You charge interest, that's a deduction in Australia. That amount of money would have been subject to tax at, say, 30% in Australia. But it leaves the country, it may have a withholding tax, say, of 10%. But when it gets to the tax haven, it may have it may be taxed there at, say, 1%. So your overall tax burden becomes 11% as opposed to 30%. That's essentially why you go through what's called a tax haven, what we call low tax jurisdictions.
BHP Billiton executives declined to be interviewed, but in a statement they strenuously denied their BVI finance companies were used to avoid tax.
BHP Billiton does not engage in aggressive tax planning. Each of these companies was and continues to be resident in the UK for tax purposes and therefore subject to UK tax on its worldwide income. Consequently, any profits made by these companies were taxable in the UK at the normal company tax rate.
Tony Cottonmore, President Corporate Affairs, BHP Billiton.
Jim McKee, Head of Tax, BHP Billiton.
BHP Billiton is extremely sensitive about its tax affairs following last year's Senate tax inquiry.
You don't have a marketing hub in Singapore, do you? Or you do?
Executives initially stonewalled senators' questions about a tax office audit that claimed the company had avoided millions in tax by using a so-called marketing hub in Singapore.
It's a direct question. Have you been issued with a paper from the tax office in relation to this matter?
We would prefer not to answer that question, thank you.
Well, I think that actually the community deserves to know. I mean,
it was unbelievable to have Australia's largest taxpayer come before a Senate inquiry about tax minimisation and not be able to present basic information about their own structure. It just shows the contempt with which that committee was being held at that point in time.
BHP Billiton emerged as one of the better corporate taxpayers in the Senate inquiry compared with foreign multinationals.
30% is our effective tax rate.
The Senator's controversial report is due as early as this week.
Are you serious? You've come to this inquiry?
Coinciding with the Mossack Fonseca leak, it's expected to reignite public anger over tax avoidance by corporations and wealthy individuals.
Do you not know, or you're not telling us? Is it?
I think that we've reached a tipping point, that people are really mad as hell and they don't want to take it anymore, that this is an opportunity to open this up, and this issue won't go away until there is a fair rate of tax being paid by these companies.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, come on.
And
But frankly, to the justification that's provided by a lot of these companies that, well, we're technically operating, we believe, within the law, so that makes it okay. You know, I think we have to call that for what that is, and that's bullshit. I mean, that is a bullshit argument. The reality is that they are operating in a very, very grey area of the law. You know, this isn't a victimless act. Every dollar that's minimised is a dollar that's not going to a school, that's not going to a hospital, that's not going to a service that we require and need. And yet, these companies are getting away with it, and we're letting them get away with it.
Public anger is putting pressure on the Australian Tax Office to step up the fight against tax avoidance. And tonight, Four Corners can reveal tax officials have got their hands on some of the leaked Mossack Fonseca files for its high-profile tax evasion task force, Project Wickenby.
Our analysis so far has shown a number of people who are either in our Wickenby or our Wealthy Australians investigation programs have come up. So there is some...
Have come up in the Mossack Fonseca data.
Yes, they have, yes. People involved in these sorts of secret arrangements to evade tax, they need to consider their position very carefully, bearing in mind that in recent years 46 people have been sent to jail as part of the Wickenby program. It's clear that there's a great groundswell of resentment of these tax evasion activities because we continually receive information from informants. We've received information since the company you're referring to on other companies. And so I don't think you can rely on these secret arrangements being kept secret.
Mossack Fonseca, once renowned for its secrecy in handling the affairs of the rich and powerful, now finds itself on a very public stage. We're here outside the Panamanian headquarters of Mossack Fonseca, and here with media from all over the world who are demanding answers to their questions. So far, we haven't got any.
Tell him that a group of around 20 or 25 international journalists is in front of your building.
The firm's response to this unprecedented expose was to send out its PR man.
Aquí está claro, está muy claro, nosotros no lavamos dinero, no aceptamos dinero, no tomamos dinero, y eso es lo único que les puedo decir.
Our detailed questions were never answered, but Mossack Fonseca denies it ever acted illegally.
We follow both the letter and spirit of the law. Because we do, we have not once in nearly 40 years of operation been charged with criminal wrongdoing.
That Mossack Fonseca has never been charged speaks volumes about what is legal and acceptable in the global world of tax havens. Turning a bright public spotlight on that world, many believe, is the only way to achieve a fairer and cleaner financial system.
There's really only one solution, and that's to change the laws. The Parliament has to change the laws if it wants a particular result. It can't rely on concepts of fairness to come into the thinking of the courts. Appeals to the corporate social conscience of paying their fair share. Well, they can legitimately say, we're paying what we are required to pay under the law, and if that's not fair by your standards, change your laws.